Randy Weingarten, welcome to Fast Politics.
And always honored to be with you, my dear.
Republicans had a dream to dismantle the Department of Education. Looks like it's starting to happen. What is happening? You are the head of the teachers union. What is happening?
Let me take a step back because I'm
Yeah.
watching two different streams on Twitter, on Blue Sky, on social media, and New York Magazine, that there's all this emerging research about what we need to do to help our kids. And it's coming out in places like, Jonathan Haidt, the Mississippi Miracle, places that you wouldn't expect it. This is what the Department of Education's responsibility is. Instead of cutting the research about what best practices are, what they should be doing is curating what we're seeing in the aftermath of COVID, what we're seeing in the aftermath of social media, what best practices are happening around the country. And they should be prioritizing this and making this available for parents and for teachers and for school boards and school districts. And they should be actually making a priority our kids' education. What are they doing instead? What they're doing instead is they're dismembering, basically selling off parts of the education department so that, some of it is in labor, some of it is in state. So it's never going to be put back together again in this kind of way. And what they're also doing, and this is the point I really want to make, Molly, is it's an abandonment. It's not just an abdication of responsibility that the Congress has given to them since 1980, but it's an abandonment of children. So if you put just this last couple of months together, they cut SNAP during a shutdown when they don't have to, and that disproportionately hurt young people, kids. They cut Medicaid as part of their big ugly bill, $1 trillion,
Right.
that disproportionately hurts kids in terms of the CHIP program, the Children's Health Insurance Program, and families with kids. They cut the research that universities do, which disproportionately hurts kids in college as well as long-term research. And they basically made a complete mess of the student debt program. I mean, we've sued and they've now restarted these programs, but they made a basic mess of it that affects 45 million people who have gone to college. And then, as I said when I started, the stuff they're supposed to do, like lift up good practices, I have not seen once Linda McMahon get to a microphone or do an op-ed saying, this is a promising program that we've seen. Let's see if other people can do it. So it's an abandonment of children. And that is why I am so angry about it. I don't care if you're liberal or conservative or independent. Don't abandon children. Don't basically undermine children in America.
So let's talk through. Florida has started a kind of like homeschooling, money for homeschooling,
Correct.
disassembling of public education that is, I think, pretty intense and
Right.
seismic. So I would love you to talk about that first.
What's happened is there's an independent audit in Florida now
Yeah.
about that program that have shown that they have wasted millions of dollars.
Basically, if you say you're going to homeschool your kid, you can get a certain amount of money
Yeah,
every year, and then they
thousands.
don't go to tens of thousands, tens of thousands.
It's about,
About
I think it's a $7,500 grant.
right, and
But
then you can use it for whatever you want, and you don't
exactly,
necessarily need to show where it goes, and
exactly,
that
including the fact that Disney is advertising to people, use it with us. Come to
right.
Disney World.
So that's happening in Florida, and
Mhm.
that's a state level problem, but I think it shows Florida kind of shows where the
Well,
Trumpist head is at.
but this is what I'm saying. Look, I don't parent wants to homeschool their kid, let me use my grandmother's Yiddish, sei gesund. They
Right.
have a right to homeschool their kid. If a parent wants to send their kid to a religious school, they have a right to do that. What I'm concerned about is this. Every time you take money out of the public school system and you starve it, and we don't actually do what we need to do in terms of what are the best practices so kids are numerate, kids are literate, kids actually are engaged instead of dealing with the kids feel welcome and safe. We know many things that actually work. We need to have the time, and we need to have the tools, and we need to have the teachers who know how to do this stuff and actually don't get smeared and unsupported and actually have the time to do this. But instead, they're taking money in Florida out of public schools. And they're making teachers feel miserable about their jobs. And they're saying to them, if you actually welcome kids in your classroom, you could get in trouble. If you teach in a certain way, you could get in trouble. So they're creating all sorts of distrust and taking money away. At the same time, they're creating incentive for homeschooling. So, what does that do in terms of the country? And what does that do in terms of children? So, my job is to actually fight as hard as I can to get the funding for public schools and then to make public schooling the best it can be so that parents want to send their kids to public schools, that teachers want to be at public schools, and kids thrive. So, for me, okay, a parent wants to homeschool. I'm not going to substitute my judgment to the parent, but why is the incentive to homeschool rather than the incentive being to make public schooling the best it can be? So they want to get me to be negative about the parent who homeschools. I'm not going to do that. That's not my judgment. But if all of a sudden the high school in Florida, and we have some of these great high schools, if the high school in Florida has all sorts of really cool programs, including, culinary programs and advanced manufacturing and project-based instruction and debate, and kids feel safe and welcome and they like it, very few people are going to homeschool. So
Right.
why is the incentive not to help make the programs in public schooling, make them welcoming and safe and make the programs cool? But if you don't have the money for it, how are you going to stand up that, debate program? How are you going to stand up that culinary program? And so they're taking
Right.
money
They
away
could
from
be
those
doing that.
programs
Yeah.
and defunding them so we don't have them.
I would love it if you could talk about this. So, the war on the Department of Education, because they want to do it. Now, I would love you to explain what it means, like how they can do it. There's certain parts of it that they've already cut or they're trying to cut, like Pell Grants.
Let me tell you what they are actually doing. It all violates the laws. Like it's
Right.
that none of what they're doing is legal, but they're basically doing a bunch of different cuts that will effectively disable the Department of Education. So
Mhm.
once we won, they started this process a few months ago. Our case is in the federal courts in Massachusetts. The courts, basically the federal trial court, the appellate court, said, no, you can't do that. When you basically fire half of the people, that means you're saying that you don't want a Department of Education. But this is what happened. The Supreme Court, in its shadow docket,
Oh,
stopped the injunction. So we were winning in the courts below saying, no, you can't do it. Supreme Court said, oh, no, we'll deal with this case on the merits, later on. But they no longer, Linda McMahon, you no longer are enjoined against this. So the
so what does
first
that
thing they
mean?
did, meaning they said, you can do it. The
Okay.
first thing, they got rid of the preliminary injunction that stopped them. That was the Supreme Court shadow docket. The first thing so no decision, just very quietly doing that. So the first thing that the department did, the first thing Linda McMahon did is she took all the career tech ed programs and put them in the labor department. There was testimony. So have you noticed? They haven't heard anything about career tech ed in the last few months. And remember, February of this year, both Donald Trump and we love career tech ed. He made February career tech ed month. Haven't heard anything. Why? Because we heard testimony this week in the Congress that it's totally screwed up. The career
Right.
tech ed grants aren't getting to people. It's totally screwed up because they put it in a place that doesn't know how to do it. Now,
Right.
why do I use that as an example? Because
No, it's a
now,
great
this
example.
week, they're doing the same thing. They said, oh, we've done such a good job with career tech ed. We're going to move everything in elementary and secondary education, everything. Title 1, Title 2, Title 3, meaning reading,
Right.
the programs for poor kids, the programs for limited English learners, teacher preparation. We're moving all of that to the labor department, which has done such a
Why?
great job with career tech ed. They're moving all of it there. So basically, they're moving it there to die. I
Right.
mean, that's what they're doing. And then they're moving the Fulbright Scholars Program to the Department of State. Okay, I could actually see that if they cared about kids. They're
Right. They
moving
don't.
the education for kids on Indian reservations to the Bureau of Interior. I could actually see that because, like the Defense
Right.
Department before this administration, they do a good job with the schools that are on military bases. So
Right.
if they cared about this stuff, you could see those two things. But then this is the kicker. They're moving the programs that deal with individuals with disabilities to, let me tell you, drum roll please, Health and Human Services. The same department that just in the last many few days has basically said that you can't cure autism. You're basically saying to parents with kids who are autistic or on the spectrum, you're moving to the department that doesn't think you can help those. What? Like what?
Well, it's also I also think, like,
That's what they're trying to
RFK
do.
is pretty nutty. So to have him in
Yeah.
charge of your kid's education is
Yeah.
pretty crazy.
So you could see in a normal administration, and look, one of my predecessors, Al Shanker, he actually opposed creating a separate Department of Education. He said, and in retrospect, he's probably right now. He said that keep it in health, education, and welfare because, before that reorganization, because he was afraid that kids would become a political hot potato
Right,
and
which they
and
have.
which they have. And so that was his view. He said, keep it with families, keep everything together so that kids were more protected. And it's been the Department of Education because Carter established it. It's been something that the Republicans have wanted to get rid of since Carter established it. And since kids don't really have a lobbying, nobody lobbies for kids. Kids are lobbied for by us, by their parents. There's not anyone other than rushing to courts, who are basically saying, don't do this to kids. But so effectively, they are going to basically get rid of those functions with exception of, I guess, the Office of Civil Rights. And I'll say one more thing about this, which is the Department of Education doesn't run any schools. It's never run any schools, except for maybe the schools. It has some oversight for the schools on Indian reservations. So they are creating this setup to eliminate it based on a lie. So if you don't actually think that kids are doing as well as they should do right now, you're basically saying that we're going to give it to the states who already are doing what you don't think is very good right now. How does
Right.
that make any sense? That's
Is
why I call it abandonment.
is the ultimate goal here just to completely end the Department of Education? I mean, just to
Yes.
move everything into other places?
Yes, the ultimate goal is to end the Department of Education and to basically not only move everything to other places, but there's too many of us who really believe that the money that states get for this from the federal government is too important. There's too many of us who are both Democrats and Republicans that fight against them when they try to, they try to take all the money and lump sum it instead of giving like Title One to to PS1 in New York City, which is how the grant money works right now. It goes directly to students. So there's too many of us, both Republican and Democrats, who actually, fought to stop them from doing that. So now they're just denuding it in every which way they can to make it disappear. And there will be no one that will help if a state decides not to use the money correctly. There's no one other than going to the courts that are going to basically, be the one calling balls and strikes. So
Right.
they don't, I mean, they literally don't care. That's why I get to, they just don't care about kids.
You've
And
been
kids are our future. But this administration is so, it looks backwards. It doesn't look forwards anyway on anything. It doesn't think about what the future should look like. I mean, it basically is whatever big tech tells it to do in terms of AI, it does. And he's quite enriched himself. As regular people, life has gotten less and less affordable.
Randy Weingarten. I hope you'll come back.